back, and I am delighted to say, always. Rod Martin is back as well. Rod Martin is, of course, the founder and the chairman of the board of our Institute for the American Future, of which I'm very proud to be the president. He is an incredibly free-range minded individual who now is the proprietor, in addition to all of that, of the Rod Martin Report, which you can find at rodmartin.org. He is an entrepreneur and businessman as well, who cut his teeth with Peter Thiel in the PayPal mafia, but he, before that, worked as a policy advisor to then Governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, a man in short of many parts, including a longtime leader of the Southern Baptist Convention. We're always delighted to have a chance to pick his brains, considerable brains at that. Welcome back, Rod. Good to have you, my friend.
Good to be here.
So I wanted to start with some thoughts of my own on the subject that I want to turn to with you first. It was something you discussed with Eric Metaxas recently, and very impressively. It concerns what's been happening to our conservative movement, for want of a better term, MAGA, the base, the right, however you describe it. What has been taking place, I think, is nothing short of a sort of fratricide at a very unfortunate time. We've got conservatives who agree on some things and disagree on other things, now increasingly finding that they don't seem to agree on much at all, and that in their disagreements there is a kind of bitterness that is poisonous, I'm afraid, certainly for a movement more needed now, arguably, than ever. Some of the disagreements revolve around Israel, its importance to our country, its importance, of course, to the Jewish people, but also its importance to Western civilization. And I'd want to be absolutely clear about this. I don't think we can overstate the importance of Israel to Western civilization, as well as to our own interests, particularly in the Middle East. And I find it difficult to state with sufficient conviction that I pray that those who are seeing things otherwise will think better of their position as it becomes more and more untenable by the day. Rod Martin, you talked a bit about this with Eric Metaxas, and your clarity on the kinds of, well, at best, willful blindness, and at worst, I think, a kind of dishonesty, is characterizing the positions of those who are finding fault with Israel and disregarding its importance to us. Walk us through your thinking on this, sir, if you would.
Well, we have a lot of friends who are theologically committed to Israel for one reason or another. We have a growing number of friends, and in some cases not friends, who have a theological argument with the first group, and therefore Israel is evil. And you just look at that, and honestly, I just shake my head. Israel is like every other country that we have any business with. We don't agree religiously with Japan if we're Christians. We don't agree religiously with France, honestly, if we're Christians. So, but we get along. We can be friends. We can love our neighbors as ourselves. We can make meaningful alliances. We can have meaningful trade deals. There's nothing wrong with any of that. And, for some of our pastors on one side to take this vehement anti-Israel position because they don't agree with Mike Huckabee's eschatology just boggles my mind. I mean, I don't agree with lots of countries for lots of reasons, some of them theological, that those people seem to want to give a pass. So, for example, we're constantly told that somehow the tail is wagging the dog. This country of 9.5 million people controls the whole world, and certainly Donald Trump. I haven't noticed that Donald Trump is capable of being controlled by anybody. I think the last 4 years showed us anything. It's that literally nobody can control Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has spent a lifetime telling us he's pro-Israel. So why are these folks all of a sudden in an uproar about Donald Trump doing exactly what Donald Trump promised he would do? And more to the point, look, Israel is a capitalist, free enclave in a sea of tyrants. Everyone around them has fewer rights than Arabs do in Israel. There's no question about this. They have become a technology powerhouse. This idea that somehow they're dependent on U.S. aid is honestly, at best, 40 years out of date, and second, just absurd. The money that does go to Israel almost entirely never gets to Israel. It goes to General Dynamics and Boeing as grants to help them buy things, largely in exchange for things they're doing for us, like the joint development work on Iron Beam and so forth, but also all our dirty work in the Middle East. The idea that Donald Trump got dragged into the war against Iran? Are you kidding? Donald Trump set it up where the Israelis do all the hard stuff, and then we show up for a grand finale. And again and again and again, you see this, and it reflects just a level of nonsense that is hard to grasp, apart from, of course, Qatari money.
Well, that's the point I wanted to get to, Rod. It seems as though nonsense doesn't begin to describe
Yes,
the impetus behind this. I'm sure there's some of it, obviously, but
some of it.
to the extent that we are witnessing an aggressive influence operation by this nation of Qatar, which has more money than it knows what to do with, but what it seems to be principally interested in doing with it is trying to advance the jihad and take down those opposed to its success. And one of the ways in which that is playing out, as best I can tell, is, buying off, for want of a better term, some prominent conservative influencers to a point where it does get into that space where it seems rather virulently anti-Israel, not just, sort of an argument about our priorities, domestic and otherwise. Your thoughts?
Well, the thing is, if Qatar weren't doing it, George Soros or Reid Hoffman would be. This is the thing. We're constantly treated to this idea that there's this sea of Israeli money in American politics, but the numbers are pretty clear. In a ranking of numbers 1 through 10 countries by expenditures to influence American politicians and citizens in America, Open Secrets has Israel in 10th place. The Chinese are ahead. Qatar is ahead. Saudi Arabia is ahead. Get this, the Bahamas are ahead. Everybody is ahead of Israel. And why wouldn't they lobby in the United States? It's not illegal to lobby in the United States. We have this crazy newfangled thing called the First Amendment. So yeah, they have interests here against people who are outspending them dramatically to try to turn American opinion against them. They're spending money to try to keep people in support of them. Okay, that's all fine. That's called a marketplace of ideas. Now, if you could show they were bribing politicians or something, that'd be fine. We should put those people in jail. But wouldn't you have to start with Eric Swalwell? Wouldn't you have to start with all these Democrats who are in bed with the Chinese Communist Party? And I don't hear any people attacking China. None of these people are questioning the DNA of the Han Chinese in the way that they suddenly are about Jews. And I just keep coming back to, first of all, that's been completely debunked. The science claiming that Jews in Israel aren't the same as Jews 2,000 years ago is just obscene anti-Semitism. There's no science to it, but it's more than that. A Jew is anybody who wants to be a Jew, just like a Baptist is anybody who wants to be a Baptist. We don't do a DNA check on Baptists. That's just silly. So, the kinds of arguments being marshaled sound like they come straight out of Goebbels. And it's just horrifying to watch. And it really, I'm not saying we should cancel anybody. That's not true. I want to give them enough exposure that we can hear how obscene their arguments actually are and reject them.
Yeah. And I guess the question that occurs, Rod, is are the folks that such individuals seem to be particularly appealing to, namely the younger cohort of Americans, able to determine from that exposure that these folks are acting in an obscene way, that what they're saying and what they're recommending, what they're calling for, vis-a-vis Israel and for that matter, vis-a-vis the United States, is beyond the appalling. It's totally unacceptable. I want to explore this with you on the other side of the break, because I think this is really a critical issue for our time. Is have we lost the youth of our country, or are they susceptible to making sensible, responsible decisions once they understand actually what people are trying to do here, Goebbels-esque especially? We'll be talking about all of that and much more with Rod Martin on the other side of the short break. Please stay tuned. We're back, and so is Rod Martin. Praise the Lord. Follow his great work at rodmartin.org and support the work of the organization that he founded, the Institute for the American Future, at usfuture.org. As one of its employees, I will be very appreciative. Rod, let me just drill down a little bit. Tucker Carlson is an individual who has been doing some, I think, very troubling platforming of another individual, notably, well, several of them. We had the Qatari prime minister, I believe, and the Iranian president, I think it was, and then more recently, some historians of some disrepute. But Nick Fuentes is a name that I had not heard, frankly, until fairly recently, and for 2.5 hours, Tucker showcased him and some of his ideas. I'm not sure that they were fully on display in that performance. It seemed as though he was tempering his rhetoric a bit. But the more you're exposed to it, and I find it a kind of soiling experience, honestly, the more it's evident he really falls into that category of reprehensible people that you're talking about. What are your thoughts about the seeming affinity of an awful lot of young Americans to the kind of, worldview, shall we say, the kind of anti-Semitic, the kind of pro-Nazi even attitudes that Fuentes seems to embrace?
Well, I just want to start by saying I don't have any problem with Tucker platforming Nick Fuentes. I just wish Tucker had actually interviewed him with the vigor, shall we say, that he did Ted Cruz. I mean, all he did was throw softballs at Fuentes, and when Fuentes outright says, "I think Stalin is cool," Tucker just let it go, never came back to it, never asked to follow up at all. I'm sorry, Stalin wasn't cool. Stalin murdered 20 million of his own people and proceeded to take over every country he was in reach of, where further millions died, including China, where 65 million were killed by their communist government. There is nothing cool about that at all. But Nick Fuentes will tell you Hitler was also cool. And, all these people are cool. Okay, that's a problem for me. I don't need to know what he thinks about Israel. You can guess, but I don't even need to know. I just need to know that he's a communist. He is a communist who dresses himself up in just enough free market and pro-American trappings to be able to pretend he's on the right. but he's not. He's a communist. And not only is he a communist, he's a pretty reprehensible person. I mean, just look at the other things he's pushing. This is a guy who, there's honestly just no limit to how bad it is. Now, is he pro masculinity? Yes, but he's also misogynistic. Is he pro Trump? Well, yes, after the election, but before the election, he was posting, over and over again about how we have to do whatever we can to stop Trump. So he speaks with forked tongue. He just wants to tell you enough, like the devil, to get you to listen, and then he slips in the poison. And I don't understand why Tucker Carlson didn't interview him properly. I think a retarded fifth grader could have interviewed him better than Tucker did.
Well, and again, it's fitting a pattern. The same kind of softball approach was taken with the Iranian and with the Qatari and with some of these other characters as well, which gives, again, a certain legitimization to them all.
Again, is fine as, to the degree that it's letting them get their side out. I don't have a problem with someone interviewing the Ayatollah. I want to hear what the Ayatollah thinks. I want to hear what Saddam Hussein thought or Adolf Hitler thought. Those are reasonable things. When I hear Vladimir Putin, I know more about what's going on in Russia. Of course, his spin is on it, but if we're sitting here, we're, giving it our spin too. I don't have a problem with that. I believe in the marketplace of ideas, but I know that if I were the one being interviewed, I would be getting hit harder than Nick Fuentes got or than Vladimir Putin got. And I think there's a real fundamental problem with that, not with the interview, but with the interviewer.
Amen. Let me turn to something you've written about at rodmartin.org, and that is that President Trump's hemispheric strategy is actually part of a two-front approach to containing communist China. You're a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China. As you know, we're rather big on rolling back China, not just containing it. But talk us through the theory of these pieces that you're talking about, the two-front aspects of this conflict.
Well, Donald Trump grasps that if you can't handle your own backyard, you can't handle anything else. And we used to understand that. We actually understood that for most of American history. We have gotten very slack in the last not just years, but several decades. And we have let China and Russia and Iran in particular have meaningful, dangerous presences in places like Venezuela and Cuba, which is just unconscionable. And we've let China own the ports at both ends of the Panama Canal, which is just unconscionable. And we've let China move into a position where it could end up exploiting the mining rights in Greenland, which is just unconscionable. So Donald Trump has addressed all of those things quite aggressively since even before he took office again. And that's essential. That's foundational to American grand strategy globally.
This is, I think, at the core of the question that I want to explore with you a bit further. If the president is, in fact, intent on containing China, Rod, or better yet, rolling it back, and that certainly is the clear implication of what we've learned, for example, from Lee Smith's new book, The China Matrix, that chronicles Trump's attitude towards China over decades, really. I want to explore with you the other piece of his strategy, which is seemingly maintaining the Chinese Communist Party in business and, doing deals with them on, rare earths, among other things. If we, in fact, do really have a deal with them on that. Talk about it with Rod Martin. Please stay tuned. We're back. We're talking with our free-range-minded friend and colleague Rod Martin about the Trump strategy towards China Is the hemispheric security piece of it part of a larger strategy to contain, or I would prefer to see roll back the Chinese Communist Party, put it, as Ronald Reagan did, the Soviet Party, on the ash heap of history? But there's also this other dimension, Rod, that I wanted you to address, if you would, and that is what the president is doing with respect to trade with the Chinese, including trade that seemingly is now being once again restricted by the Chinese. They've said that they are going to deny the use of their rare earth minerals, their processed rare earth minerals, by companies in the United States that are doing business, at least in part, with our military. How does all this come together as a grand strategy, sir? And to what end?
I think Trump learned most of his lessons on these things from Reagan, which has been really remarkable to watch, actually. Obviously, the details differ and the circumstances in the world are very, very different from the 80s. And in most ways, that's a good thing. We're not in danger of being conquered by the Soviet Union tomorrow. And that's definitely a net positive in the world. But what Reagan did, as you know, was not eliminate the Soviet Union by bombing the radar at Krasnoyarsk or, going after SS-20s, with FB-111s. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to bankrupt them, which he did. And that involved continuing to do business with them, but also constraining their ability to do that business. So you get the deal with the Saudis in 85 that starts collapsing the price of oil, which then, as now, was the source of Soviet hard currency. And all of a sudden, they can't keep up in the arms race. They certainly can't compete with SDI. And, Gorbachev is trying to get the economy to do right. And in the process, he just absolutely broke the entire system. So I think that's what you're seeing here. I think Trump is aware that there are certain things that we have allowed ourselves to be dependent on China for that we're not going to be able to decouple from overnight. And so the continued dialogue makes sense, at least until that point at which we can. And that's in progress. As you saw during the Asian trip, we had a new deal. Well, actually, this was at the White House the week before. We had a new deal with Albanese in Australia, not just for rare earths mining, but processing. So we're taking back some of that refining, which China currently dominates 92% of. The Ukraine deal is about rare earths. The Greenland deal is in part about rare earths. But we're also opening significant facilities in the United States, old mines and new mines that are capable of producing these things. And we're building refining capacity, including a giant new plant in Fort Worth that will take over production of about a third of the rare earths magnets we need. So, and that's just one facility. A lot of this 18 trillion in new investment coming in will go to that. And you just see you just saw $500 million go from the Pentagon into RP Materials, which is the main producer in the United States, and another $500 million come in an investment from Apple. So we're moving aggressively on this. They're not going to be able to hold this over our heads much longer. And at the same time, the other big pain point, of course, is their dominance of pharmaceuticals. And Trump is moving aggressively on getting pharmaceutical plants built here. So I think over a 4-year period, you see their ability to control events drop significantly.
So for the interim period, though, Rod, General Motors and Tesla have both said that they're going to respond to this threat from the Chinese to restrict companies that do business with the Pentagon by saying, they're ending their supply chain dependency on China. Is that something they can do at this point in time? I mean, I take your point that there's a lot of other things in the works that will give them options in the future, but can we essentially decouple even selectively by such companies now, do you think?
There are stockpiles here and there. There are long-term contracts here and there. they're not going to make a pronouncement like that without thinking, at least, that they have it covered. And I don't doubt that they do. If we have a 2-year production hit on F-35s, we've got a bunch of them. The world won't end. And at the other side of that, we're just going to double production. So even if you have that kind of thing, I don't think it materially affects us. But here's what I do know. Scott Bessent was on TV again yesterday saying, if they do mess with us on this, we have a lot of levers on them. And he's not kidding. And we can prove that they actually are susceptible to some of those by virtue of 2 factoids that your audience will appreciate. The first one being that we are still charging China almost 4 times the tariff they're charging us. And Xi Jinping agreed to that. That's remarkable to me. The other thing is Trump really pressed him on Russian oil imports. Obviously, they can't wean off immediately, and obviously there's only so much face they can lose in one shot. But 2 of the largest Chinese oil companies immediately announced that they aren't buying Russian oil anymore. Will they keep their word? Don't know, but that's actually a really big diplomatic shift, even if it doesn't change a lot on the ground. And Putin has to plan for that and deal with that, whether it happens or not. So that materially impacts Putin's ability to continue the war in Ukraine. He is completely energy dependent for funding that war and, frankly, funding his government. And at some point, that starts putting enough hurt on his oligarchs that they start demanding some kind of change, either in his policy or in his position.
Meaning that his days may be numbered in all of this. A fascinating perspective, as usual. You have stretched the envelope of the possible here, and our appreciation to you is likewise greatly expanded as well. Rod Martin, thank you for all that you're doing at rodmartin.org. Thank you for featuring this program and our conversations with you on that platform, as well as your great Rod Martin reports. Subscribe, folks, to them. Come back to us soon. I hope the rest of you do the same next time. Until then, you'll go forth and multiply.